Welcome to Courtney on Health, heard on MalcolmPresents.com, possibly because I'm having problems with the internet, not with the internet, with my control panel. So right now I'm only on YouTube. And Courtney,
Ground control the Major Tom, huh? Is that what we're doing here?
anyway, let's start the show.
All right. We will start the show. Hi, Courtney, and hi, Malcolm. Welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast podcast series which focuses on one's overall well-being with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science degree in nutrition and applied physiology. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond. We still never figured out, as we say every time, what the beyond is. I'm gonna go to this new green asteroid that's passing. We'll go to that one, and we'll help guide you on a path to wellness and health,
and to righteousness,
righteousness.
We'll talk about that later.
Oh, really? No, I don't know. That's for a different show. Anyway, so my grandma Sylvia, who I absolutely adored and loved, would always say to me, you are as sweet as sugar. She was right. I was a sweet kid, so I've been told. And but she used to spoil me with sweets, the Hershey's, the licorice, all the stuff. So, each kid in their time gets spoiled by grandma for sure. And usually it's sugary stuff. But so let's kind of break down how sugar and sugar substitutes play a role in our health and well-being for fuel and energy. We know that sugar gets a bad rap, but we tend to indulge in our favorite cupcake or Kit Kat anyway. But what about sugar substitutes, which taste very sweet but don't contain sugar? Traditionally, artificial sweeteners have been the only option for people who need to monitor their blood glucose levels or weight. Some experts believe that artificial sweeteners can pose health hazards, but research is ongoing, so they're not really, totally sure. And Courtney will, talk about that. Foods labeled sugar-free, keto, low-carb, or diet often contain sugar substitutes, which fall into three categories: artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols, and novel sweeteners. I guess I don't know what some of those mean. So Courtney will give us some info on sugar alternatives and artificial sweeteners to help us make good choices when we try to sweeten our food. And in the words of Jackie Gleason, and I am really, really dating myself now, but Mr. Malcolm knows.
Jackie who?
Jackie Gleason.
I remember him.
Oh my gosh, please. But no, I remember my brother and I used to watch the Honeymooners. Go ahead, Maxine.
Okay, well, he would say, how sweet it is. And so with that, Courtney, how sweet is it? That's my question.
The next line you have to say, and away we go.
And away we go. Or to the moon, Alice, is maybe where we find Courtney's show and beyond. Anyway, let's get back to reality here. So you give us what is going on with these artificial sweeteners and sugar alternatives?
What's the dish with the sweets? So
yep.
For most of you know this, but if you don't, it's important to understand the role of sugar in the body. And the take-home message is that the simplest form of sugar, glucose, is your brain and your muscles' primary source of fuel. So you need it to survive. There's no way around it. What of course we know now is that we don't need nearly as much as what in particular Americans put back on any given day, week, year, decade. So need some to function, absolutely. Too much, we see the ills of that, everything from cavities, through inflammation, to exacerbating diabetes, issues with diabetes, to obesity and overweight. So we know the issues associated with too much sugar. So there's a balance that will be involved. So when you keep in mind that all carbohydrates regardless of whether they come from a candy bar, and I'm not suggesting you have that all the time, or it comes from a bowl of rice, will get broken down into the most simplest form that your body can use, that being glucose. So thinking about what the role is, people are like, well, I'm taking all sugar out. You could do that, but it would not bode well for you. Okay, so let's talk about when people mean removing or eliminating some of the sugar, we really are talking about the added sugars, those that have no really redeeming nutritional value to them, but bring with them a very high caloric load. So that's what people mostly mean when they're talking about minimizing their amounts of sugar in their diet. Maxine, you mentioned this. So sugars are in different categories. So at the top of that is going to be something called nutritive sweeteners. Most people know what these are, maybe not as nutritive sweeteners, but they are things like table sugar, which is a disaccharide that is sucrose, and sucrose is actually split into two compounds. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. Sucrose is fructose and it is glucose. Okay, there's things like honey, which is also split pretty much fructose and glucose. Molasses is, again, combination fructose glucose. Things like agave, which I imagine you guys have heard of agave, and you may even like it. I don't know if you guys use that or not. It's getting a lot of FaceTime on social media. It's in stores. It's getting a big push. Agave is also, it's when we mean a nutritive sweetener, we mean something that's got a calorie load to it. Okay, so it has in fact more calories than molasses, honey, or table sugar does. But more important than that, it is almost entirely fructose. And you say, well, what does it matter? It's got a low GI. Why don't I just have all as much as I want? The problem with that is your body looks at fructose and your body looks at glucose, and they're metabolized in a different way. So think back years ago when there was this big brouhaha over high fructose corn syrup being in everything. It was in breads, it was in pastry products, it was all over the place. Why was this an issue? Because they were seeing that the liver, which needs to break down, which is needed to break down fructose, was getting way overloaded with the American diet that was so overloaded with high fructose corn syrup. So I'm simply bringing this to your attention because when people flood to things like agave, I want to make sure you understand the whole picture of what it brings to the table and what it can and cannot do for you. So it's in that umbrella of those caloric sweeteners, those nutritive sweeteners.
Right,
Maxine,
and that's why it's important, to look at labeling and ingredients, because if you see high fructose corn syrup, go away. Try it's something that I'm always looking to make sure is not in anything. I try not to buy processed foods as much as possible, but you have to be a good consumer, educated consumer, and a lot of this is because you don't want that in your body and things breaking down in your liver. You just don't want it. So that's why.
Yeah, it's important to know that. So, again, I wouldn't put agave and high fructose corn syrup necessarily in the same category, but it's important to realize that we are talking about the same type of sugar, and that your liver is going to be responsible for breaking that down. The other category of nutritive, so caloric sweeteners, you mentioned them, Maxine, would be your sugar alcohols. They've been around for a long time. They don't have the same calorie load as nutritive sweeteners. They're a little bit less. So it ranges. Some of them have 2 calories per gram. Some have 3 calories per gram. But it is, they've been around for a while. Those are the ones, and they're a little easier to identify, that have that OL hanging off the end of them. So for example, sorbitol, maltitol, xylitol. I say the easiest one because it's almost always in chewing gum, sugar-free chewing gum. Again, they are these are all generally regarded as safe, everything we're talking about today. But some people are quite sensitive to sugar alcohols, meaning that even a small amount, maybe not in a stick of gum, but maybe a little bit more than that, some of these individuals will have some significant GI issues. So it could be gassiness, it could be bloating, It could cause, it could have a laxative effect. In fact, there are naturally occurring sugar alcohols found in things like, I didn't have a pear handy, but I do have my fresh fruit here. Sugar alcohols are in things like pears, for example, and certain fruits. So they do exist naturally in some of the foods that we eat, but most often than not, they are produced in a lab, and they are sort of chemically produced, and that's what's used in certain foods.
Interesting.
So yeah, so
but I was
keep that in
thinking, is
mind.
that as
Yeah.
alcohol? I mean, obviously it's the sorbitol and all those. And then when you said alcohol, I was like, alcohol? I mean, actual alcohol. I mean, the sugars in that, I'm sure. Especially if you have one of these drinks that have everything in it. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
So you
yeah,
gotta,
yeah.
you gotta
So,
watch.
no,
You
there's
gotta
no,
watch that too.
it's a different, it's a sugar alcohol, so it is a little bit different. In fact, regular alcohol has a much higher calorie load. It's actually closer to 7 calories per gram. But nonetheless, a lot of individuals, if they're not paying attention to the foods that they're eating, may be getting more of these sugar alcohols, whichever one there is, in their foods. So gums, like I said, it's in a lot of things like granola bars, protein bars, and I'm putting that in quotes, some cereals. So really be sure, particularly if you're having some issues, like some GI issues that you can't quite figure out, be sure you're reading those labels, because it has to be listed as an ingredient in that ingredient line. So just be aware of what you're getting.
I think 90% of all the labels I read have some form of sugar in there. It's amazing, even if you don't suspect it.
Absolutely. So yeah, so anything, we mentioned the sucrose before, so you're a slightly easier way to maybe identify something that's not so obvious like sucrose would be to look for that OSE, maltitose. So fructose, that OSE is typically going to tip you off to the presence of a nutritive sweetener being in that product.
What about lactose?
Lactose, sure, anything. So that's naturally occurring milk sugar. So that would, and some people have an issue with that also from a GI wise, but that's a naturally occurring sugar. So again, there's that OSE that you'd be looking for, and it's pretty, sometimes something will just say honey, and then you just need to be able to identify that. But it's important because there are lots of different words and phrases that a company might use to make it sound, a little healthier than what it is. So for example, if it says 100% fruit juice or 100% apple juice in there, it's sugar. It's basically sugar. There's no way to cloak that. That is what that is. So there's lots of ways for a company to get sneaky to put it in. They're telling you it's in there, but a consumer might not necessarily look at that and say, "Oh, it's apples. It's apple juice. What's wrong with
Right,
that?"
if the label said 100% apple juice, oh, that's good. That's natural.
Right. And that is part of the problem. So the other side, and then so those are our nutritive sweeteners. We have our non-nutritive sweeteners, which is a category, and you mentioned 2 of them, Maxine, are artificial sweeteners and our novel sweeteners. So let's talk about those artificial sweeteners first. I have a couple of examples here. I don't have all of them. One of the oldest, and people, I love it because I usually help people identify these by the color of the packet. So your pink packet, right?
Pink, right.
So your saccharin is the chemical name. It typically will go as sweet and low, which is one of the brand names, is a type of artificial sweetener. I don't have an example of sucralose here, but sucralose is the chemical name. Splenda is how it is most often, the brand name most people know. That's your yellow packet. That you might see. Aspartame, which I have to say is one of the, except for saccharin, is one of the well-studied artificial sweeteners that's out there in terms of its safety content. Now, that's not saying go have it with a complete abandon. I'm just saying there is a wealth of data that supports its safety, the safety data behind it. That you will find studies that say no, but the majority of them do say yes. That is typically gone as Equal, that's the brand name Equal, or it's also known as NutraSweet. Those are just a couple of examples. Those are your blue packets. And one that, and I don't even know if you guys have heard of this one before, and I'm seeing it more and more often, not necessarily sold in packet form like this, but in a lot of products, and we'll talk about what it's used with most often. It is called asulfame potassium, short asulfame K, or just ACE K. That K stands for potassium, not vitamin K.
Interesting.
And the brand name for that, one of them is called Sunett, SUNETT. You typically won't see that listed. The brand name won't be in the product. That chemical name, asulfame K, will be listed in the product.
What about,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ones that are more natural, like stevia. I mean, they claim to be, you know, more natural, less effects, whatever. I mean, how does it work with those things? And then you said something about monk fruit. I don't know what, you know.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
So the stevia, so those were mostly our artificial sweeteners. Let's do the last category of our non-nutritive sweeteners, and that would be the novel sweeteners. So for example, monk fruit juice and stevia. Most people know stevia leaf extract. If you're buying that in a store, here's your green packet, but it's also sold in bulk. But again, it can either say stevia leaf extract, or it might be known as the brand name. Monk fruit juice is from a monk fruit. It's called one of the, it's a Chinese. You won't find it in a grocery store here. And quite frankly, you won't even find it in any Asian stores. The whole fruit, the whole monk fruit, or it's called swingle fruit. You won't find it here. It's very expensive to convert that fruit into a usable sugar, which is why monk fruit, anything made with monk fruit or that sweetener would tend to be a little on the pricier side. It's also known as, and I'm sure I'm going to destroy this, lo han guo, so LOHANGUO. So it's a mouthful. It won't say that. It will likely not say swingle fruit. The way you as a consumer will identify this is simply, it will say monk fruit or monk fruit juice, sweetened with monk fruit or monk fruit juice.
Interesting.
So the best of the breeds that we know right now, again, you guys know me well enough. I am generally a eat the real food, learn how to adjust your palate to get used to less of it. And I'm going to loop back to that in a second. But right now, of the non-nutritive sweeteners, okay, we believe the best of the breed to be the category of the stevia leaf extract, followed by monk fruit juice, keeping in mind that they haven't been used to the level that we consume them here in the United States for all that long. But if you are somebody who just puts an occasional packet in your tea or sprinkles a little on your oatmeal because you're really, you're trying not to, have too much sugar, in small doses, these are absolutely fine to consume. So again, safety data seems quite good. Once again, they're all considered generally regarded as safe, GRAS. So you should consider these fine options if they are consumed in small amounts. The problem is that next time you go into the grocery store, and this appears to be everywhere, although in a bigger store, you'll find more product, take a look at the label. And this comes back to your point, Malcolm, about, it's everywhere. The sugars or the sugar alternatives are in everything. We're seeing sugar-free labels, no sugar added, keto friendly, low carb, all of this. So a lot of these artificial sweeteners, and quite frankly, we're seeing more of the novel sweeteners being used, are being placed in these products, and it gives them a health halo that they don't necessarily deserve. So it could be a cereal, it could be a granola bar, it could be a bar that you use after a workout. It's in so many foods. I think it's important for people to truly understand the source of the sweetness in the food and whether that works for them, and what that might mean long-term to overall health.
Yeah. I know for a while that the artificial sweeteners were getting a bad rap. Specifically, I remember Sweet and Low, and they said that was worse for the body than as if you were over sugared on natural sugar. Is that still relevant, or?
don't know. I mean, I think we know the ills of regular sugar. I can't say that that's a fact, because if that were the case, they put Sweet and Low back on the market. So you probably remember they pulled it off the market for a brief period of time
I
when
think it
they
was
did some animal studies
I
back in
think
the
it was
70s.
10,000 rats got diabetes or something.
So I think, so again, these are all generally safe. I don't think we truly understand if we're trying to trick the body, right? And try and convince it that it's not getting a real sweet, and yet we give it something that is very sweet. In fact, even from the least level, Truvia is 200 to 300 times sweeter than the taste of regular sugar. Now,
Wow.
sugar is sweet, right?
Yeah, I
So
can't
that's the low
eat
end.
any of it. Yeah, it's bad. I mean, to me, it tastes.
The high end is something like a NutraSweet that's hundreds of times sweeter than regular sugar. And then I always say, it's like, but it's low GI and it doesn't raise your blood sugar level. And that is absolutely true. The bigger picture I want you to just think about and try and digest, no pun intended, is that if you're not tricking your body, okay, in terms of the sweetness, if you give it something that's even sweeter than regular sugar, how does that bode for your, like, trying to ratchet back how much sweet you have? It makes it very, very difficult. So safety data aside, and again, we've got the safety data on these, assuming of course that you're consuming, relatively small amounts of these, okay? All of that aside, we've seen no change in weight in the United States since all of these have been, available to us. True, they are an option for a lot of individuals. So people with diabetes not only need to watch sugar, added sugar, they need to watch, as you probably know, all carbohydrate intake. So not just the added sugars in their diet.
Well,
But they do offer an option for them. Go ahead, Malcolm.
yeah, it doesn't naturally carbohydrates get reduced into sugar,
Yes, yeah, that's what
like
we start.
potatoes and things. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all broken down. So things that are higher in fiber, and we've talked about this on this show before. So carbohydrates that are your friend are those that are super high in, high in fiber, or have some fiber to them, because it slows that absorption into the blood down a little, so you don't get these big swings. So things like fruits and whole grains, those are your more beneficial, and vegetables that actually even have less sugar than fresh fruit. So those are going to be beneficial, but you really have to think about the big, picture, and what ultimately it may do to your overall diet. We really have just scratched the surface in terms of what we do know and don't know about the gut biome. So more so with the artificial sweeteners like aspartame and things like that, less so with monk fruit and stevia, because they're relatively new, at least in the United States. We don't really know if they disrupt that natural bacteria in your gut, and if it does, to what extent it does disrupt that gut bacteria.
Now, in quantity, how much sugar or sugar products should we have each day, and what does that amount to, and that we could relate to? Because I know that right now in the U.S. we're fatter than we should be. Diabetes is rampant. It's sort of if it was like the COVID, it would be people would be in the hospital for it, because people are getting more and more diabetes and more allergic to sugar. So how much sugar should one take per day of the natural sugar, and how much is too much?
So the limit, and this is going to be a big hill for a lot of folks to climb, specifically added sugar, and I know we've spoken on this show about where to find that on the label. It's clearly listed now. Is about 24 grams a day for women, roughly 30 to 36 grams for men. So keep in mind on that label. So underneath, you're going to see total carbohydrate. Underneath that, you're going to see sugars, some of which are going to be naturally occurring. So let me give you an example of yogurts. So you're going to see total carbohydrate. You're going to see sugars. Obviously, if it's plain, you're not going to see any added sugar. But if it's a flavored yogurt, you're going to see another subcategory of sugars that says added sugar. That helps you split out the naturally occurring lactose from the added sugar that's in there, which for a long time was super confusing for a lot of people because they're blended in together and you can't figure out how much of it was there from the cow and how much of it was put there because of added sugar. Now you can help identify that. So I would encourage you to look at that, but be mindful of the fact, and this is just the way that it's been codified, this is just the way it's written, that added sugar, what's exempt from that is fruit juice. So if a product has 100% fruit juice added, it does not have to be included as the added sugar. So please look at that ingredient list, because those two things together will give you a much better picture of what's going on in that product. So what I mean by that is you can look at a label and it can say, let's just throw a low number, 2 grams of added sugar. But on top of that, there still could be added sugar from the fruit juice. But because it's 100% fruit juice, by law, they don't have to include it on that part of the nutrition fact label.
Okay,
Wow.
now
Interesting.
I am not a religious man, but what I want to know is if too much sugar is so harmful to the body, why did God make it so delicious? Why does it taste so good?
I know it tastes good, and this, so like I said, this is really meant to help folks really understand what's out there, because I do feel like a lot of these non-nutritive sweeteners are getting a ginormous pass right now with this health halo. So I really want folks to understand what they're eating, what is considered, helpful, and maybe not so much. I particularly want to encourage parents of kids to strongly consider giving their kiddos anything that contains either an artificial sweetener or even something with monk fruit juice or stevia in it. Why? And I get some, it's like, what, with stevia is natural, it's totally fine. Try giving your kid a muffin that's made with stevia leaf, okay, or even monk fruit. And then try and give them, or even a yogurt that's got stevia leaf in them, and then try and give them a piece of fruit. That fruit is going to taste so unsweet to them because of the very high sweetness of things like monk fruit juice and stevia in them. Are they okay in small amounts? Absolutely. But particularly in kiddos, where you're trying to help them get used to less sweet, that becomes much more difficult when you're constantly giving them things that are 200, 300, 400, 600 times sweeter than regular sugar. It's just a bigger hill to climb.
And they also talk about kids, kids have a sugar rush, and they couple things with ADHD. I mean, how does any of this fit into that in terms of, emotional well-being and how one would deal with stuff like that?
Right. Right. So there's no question that whether a child has a diagnosis of ADHD or not, that too much sugar is not what they need. And we really need to do what we can to start to ratchet that back. The data regarding quote unquote hyperactivity and nutritive sweeteners like honey, agave, regular table sugar is a little mixed. In terms of, okay, give a kid sugar and they become hyperactive. So there are some parents, by the way, who say, listen, I know my kid has had sugar based on their behavior. And the reality is you need to trust your kiddo and your instinct. If you think that that's what's happening, then it probably is happening and you need to work from there. But when you look at the data supporting this, it's a little mixed. But when I'm working with parents, sometimes I'm like, you know what, this is what the data says, but let's work with what your experience has been and kind of go from there. So that's important. Now, having said that, there are some diagnoses, and although they're very, very rare, they're inborn errors of metabolism, where there are some individuals that are born with a metabolic issue that even the lowest level of carbohydrate, any carbohydrate, is going to be problematic for them. So there's one in particular I'm thinking of, it's called GLUT1 deficiency. It's a genetic disorder. So these individuals in particular really have no choice but to choose one of the artificial sweeteners or something like a Truvia or a monk fruit juice that has very little impact or zero impact on blood sugar levels. So there's a role for these. I totally understand that. I'm simply trying to say it's breached a normal level in our food supply. It's no longer in just our beverages. It's in yogurts, it's in cereal, it's in every kid thing with a big no sugar added on it. So just make yourself aware of just how much that might be, and then maybe choose something that either doesn't have it and that's naturally lower in sugar, regular sugar, or choose one that might not have as much.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know we've talked about this previously, but I remember when I was a parent and we'd go to shopping for cereals and different things. All these cereals were so loaded with sugar. I mean, there should be a label on them. This is dangerous. Do not feed to children under 18, and there should be a big X in the
Can't see
XXX.
that.
Oh, you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah, it's true because there's so many sugared cereals and that there used to be a million commercials. Kids don't even watch Saturday morning shows anymore, I don't think. It's everything is streamed. So
As a matter,
maybe they don't get the commercials that, Lucky Charms, they're magically
but they
delicious.
see it. As a matter of fact, still my favorite cereal is grape nuts because it has nothing else in it.
Cereal. Yeah, it's a great cereal. But back to your point, Malcolm, try having, so some of those cereals now are switching over to replacing regular cane sugar, table sugar, whatever, honey, molasses, to bring that to be able to say no sugar added. And they are using things like monk fruit juice and stevia leaf extract in there. But back to, and this is really more of a observe, see what you think, see how you think it's going. If you give your child a cereal sweetened with something like monk fruit juice, and they actually find it okay. Between you, me, and the woodwork, I find a lot of my clients find monk fruit and stevia a little off-putting, like the flavor is just a little bitter. But if you have that cereal, try giving them a bowl of regular plain oat cereal or plain oatmeal. It's going to be very difficult because it's going
Maybe
to taste
throw a banana in there or something, or some fruit.
Absolutely.
Blueberries. I love blueberries.
Blueberries are anyway, guys. Hate to tell you, but we're sugared out.
We went through this, man.
I knew it was going to be quick.
We got it, but
we have to do another one in about.
I think we hit the points, but yeah, people have to be aware. So
anyway, Max, take us out.
I'm taking us out. All right. So now that we've all sugared up here, and hopefully we'll now look at things a little better. Thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, which is Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness, which is also TikTok, and visit her website, CourtneyGravities.com. For more shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com, and Malcolm Presents on YouTube, because things are up there. So just want to make sure if you can't get on the website, there's a reason. So this is
about C-Panel. Let me know.
Okay, so this has been Courtney on Health, Smart Sound Nutrition, Strong Safe Fitness, and we will catch you again next time.
Right. And if you have any questions, you can email me at malcolmpresents@gmail.com. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.